What's up guys, it's ALLDAYANTHONY. Welcome back to the Civic vlog that you hopefully know and hopefully love. Because in today's video, our budget Civic build is complete.
Come take my hand, I'll lead you in the dark, we'll dance among the stars. I hope you know.
Alright guys, so back to where it all began, this exact spot. 3 months and a total of $3,000 later, this is our final result. And hopefully you guys love it as much as I do, because I think that this car turned out freaking amazing. So in today's video, I want to give you a walk around of everything I've done over the last 3 months on and off of camera, kind of recapping everything and talking a little bit about each process to obviously give us our final result here. And again, guys, I am just ecstatic right now. I think it looks absolutely awesome. Totally worthy of what I would consider to be a very clean Civic, but it didn't start out this way. Now, if you're new to the channel or have no idea what this car is, then long story short, me and my friends at work created a challenge for ourselves on who could build the cleanest car for under $3,000 total, including the cost of the car. Now, I know that sounds crazy because I know some of you might be thinking, Anthony, there's no way you made this car for $3,000. And yes, I did. And I've actually documented pretty much every part of the process. The cost of this car when I got it was $900. And after putting about $2,100 into it, this is my final result here, and it looks awesome. Now, we decided that the winner would be established based on obviously who could build the cleanest car, but not just that. The winner would also be decided on who could sell their car for the most profit over what they have into it. And then from there, obviously keep the profit and the bragging rights. So it wasn't just about who could build a clean car, but who could also sell a car as well. So at this point in time, this car right here is currently, at this time, for sale. And I'm talking to a couple people already on Instagram through the DMs that are very interested in this car, but again, it's still up in the air. Now, the last thing I want to do is create a bidding war. That's not what I want to do. I kind of have a price in mind, and I'll let you know if you are seriously interested. Just reach out to me, and I'll obviously update you guys here in the comments below on what the result is and whether or not this car is sold at this time. But again, right now, at this point, the car is for sale. So enough talking. I want to give you guys a walk around of everything I've done in chronological order, because I feel like that's going to be the easiest way for me to do this. There was a lot done, despite some people might just looking at this thinking, okay, so he lowered it and put wheels on it. No, it was way more than that. And I'm also sure that a few of you guys can spot a couple apparent things that have changed from the last video. So with that said, let's jump into this. The very first thing I did to this car when I picked it up, or at least I was attempting to pick it up, was replace the spark plugs, the spark wires, and eventually putting a new distributor. So long story short, if you watched my previous video, you'll know that I kind of killed this car in the seller's driveway. And yeah, that's kind of a whole story in itself. So I highly recommend watching my nightmare of a story video of when I picked this thing up. But those are the things that I needed to replace to obviously get it up and running. So once I got the car running and off of a trailer, I was good to go. I had a mechanically good running car that everything worked on, right? Mechanically, the engine was sound, all the electronics worked, it was just physically in pretty rough condition. So from there, the first thing I did after the distributor and getting it running was actually replace the front windshield. The front windshield had a pretty gnarly crack in it, and I am not a fan of cracked windshields, so I went went ahead and replaced this along with a new piece of trim here that cost me roughly $100 without having to go through insurance. So I had a guy locally who kind of hooked it up on a price, made it very affordable. So a brand new windshield was put on the car, making it look awesome. So unfortunately, I didn't get any of the windshield replacement on camera, nothing too exciting there, but the thing I did get on camera was the headlight restoration. Now you guys know that headlights are one of the biggest things that can make or break a car, so I knew I had to completely refinish these. These are the OEM headlights here that just had really bad clear coat failure. So I made a video on how I went through and sanded everything down to completely refinish these to make them look like new, and they really do look like new. My plan was to put paint protection film on them after I sanded everything down and polished them out, but due to a time constraint and me just not having the time to take it down to a shop, I ended up actually Cerakoting these headlights. So Cerakote has their headlight sealant or whatever the heck you call it. So I ended up putting that on the car just to see, I don't know, if it's any good. So far, it's been a couple of months and they've been holding up great, and I think they really do look good. Now, on the topic of headlights, one of the other things I recently did was replace the stock halogen bulbs with LED bulbs. Now, I know some people are gonna hate on me and say, Anthony, you can't replace halogens with LEDs on a housing that's not meant for it. And I get it, but hey, if it's not me doing it, somebody else, it is what it is. They look really good and they really put out a ton more light. So it's a 6500K color temperature, so they're a little bit more blue. They look a ton better than the halogen lights. I'll put some B-roll so you guys can kind of see the difference, but overall, I really like them. I think the headlights turned out awesome and really took a lot of years off the car. Now, after the headlights were restored, it was time for the tedious stuff. The stuff I really don't have fun doing, but I know it's necessary and really makes the car so much cleaner, which was rock chip repair and paintless dent removal. Now, I did happen to film the rock chip repair video where I went through and filled in a lot of them on that fender there as just kind of an example, but ultimately there was rock chips all over this damn car that I had to go through and fill. So I used the Dr. Color chip system, went through every single little spot I could find, I filled them. And I tried to get it as close to perfect as I possibly could. Again, it was very tedious, but I think it worked out perfect. Now, to kind of give you an example here, there was plenty all over this hood here that I've done that you can't really see in direct sunlight. And then I think that there's a couple here you might be able to point out. Maybe, I don't know, maybe not. So after the rock chips were filled, it was time for some PDFNR, paintless dent repair, paintless dent removal. So I had my friend Eric at Carmetic come out and remove one of the major dents here that was on this rear quarter. Now, for everything else on the car, I did it myself. And no, I didn't film it because I barely knew what the hell I was doing. I had like a PDR kit that I got from Amazon for 40 bucks, which basically included a glue puller, a hammer slider, whatever the heck you want to call it, and I went through and tried to pull out as many dents as I possibly could. So basically, if a dent was 100% bad, I made it about 50% better. So it's definitely not as deep. They're still there on the car, but you really can't see it because it's a white car and they hide the dents pretty dang well. So I went through on the fenders, on the doors, pretty much everything on the car and knocked out as much as I could personally. And I think that for the most part, it looks pretty damn good. It really, really does. There's a couple that pop out to me, but overall, I'm pretty happy with my work, and I think that I did a pretty dang good job. Another one of the tedious things that I filmed was the trim wrap here. So if you watched my previous videos, you'll know that there was a lot of metal showing underneath here on this top piece of trim. It totally bothers me on these 90s Civics that have trim that is flaking off. So what I ended up doing was actually wrapping this in more of a matte black finish here, making it look pretty good. It's not new by any means, and you can still see a little bit of that texture, but for the most part versus spray painting, I feel like this turned out very, very good for being an automotive wrap. Now, you would think that after a touch-up job and some paintless dent repair that the car would start looking a hell of a lot cleaner, right? Well, not really, because some of the stuff on this car was far too big to touch up and required paint work that I'll get to here in just a little bit. So in some more downtime that I had, I thought it'd be a good idea to detail the engine bay as well as change some of the fluids. Now, I'm sure this engine bay doesn't need any introduction. I'm sure many of you have seen the condition that this engine bay was in when I first got it, and it wasn't pretty. This thing was absolutely filthy, covered in mud. I felt like the previous owner really did take this down some dirt roads or some country roads because there was just mud all over the place. I mean, everything ran smoothly. It was just dirty as hell. So this thing required a full detail, and I think the transformation was absolutely awesome. Some of my best work in an engine bay detail, at least I think. And so it turned out absolutely awesome. Everything was cleaned, degreased. I removed fallout from the engine, as well as dressed everything to keep it looking new and just condition it for the future. And so the engine turned out fantastic. Now I went through and changed a couple of the fluids. So I changed the clutch fluid, the brake fluid, the oil, obviously. I didn't touch the transmission fluid, so I'll leave that for the next owner. But all in all, the belts are still in great condition. And I did find out that, at least I think, the timing belt was actually done at 200,000 miles. At least that's what it showed on the Carfax. So at this point in time, I think most of the maintenance is up to date. I probably would recommend changing the transmission fluid. But other than that though, I think it looks pretty dang awesome. Now, one thing I will point out for the potential future owner, I would highly recommend replacing the oil pan gasket. It seeps, it doesn't necessarily leak, but it definitely does seep, and I'll typically get 1 drop of oil after the car has sat for quite some time in the same spot. So just something to think about, that if whoever buys this car, maybe replace the oil pan gasket. It's kind of a messy job. It's not really fun. I've done it before, so that's why I'll save it for the next owner. So after some of the tedious stuff, it was finally time for something fun, which was lowering the car on coilovers. So if you watched my previous video, you'll know that I installed the TrueHeart Street Plus coils. If you didn't, well, now you know. I've been running the TrueHeart Street Plus on the red Civic for 2 years now with no issues whatsoever, and I absolutely think that they're one of the best bangs for the buck. You can get into that set for roughly $400 to $500 on sale, and I really think that it's the best bang for your buck, especially for Honda Civic owners. So me and Jason went through and lowered this car with no issues. It was actually a really easy install. We had a couple C's bolts that we worked around, but overall, brand new suspension on this car. We dialed in that ride height at that point on the stock wheels, or the hubcaps as you could say, but it still looked pretty dang good. I think at that point I was pretty happy with how the car was coming together. So after lowering it, I felt like I could finally start seeing maybe some of the light at the end of the tunnel. I'm not really sure, but overall I think that the height is really good, especially now on the wheels that I'll cover here in just a little bit. I did have to raise it just a little bit, just a smidge. It might be a little bit too low, maybe even for the new owner, but I think it looks really, really good with this setup. Now, one thing I did off camera during that coilover install was actually install one of the shifter bushings. Not both of them, just one of them, because I was kind of lazy and on a time crunch. So I installed the shifter bushing closest to the transmission, which is the more circular bushing. And that one alone did improve the shift feel significantly. I think the car actually feels a little notchier. It feels really, really good. And if I have more time, I'll try to replace the rectangular one, but if not, I'll at least send it off with the new owner. Now at that point my car was low, still kind of ugly, still needed paint work, so I thought the next thing that made sense was the interior detail. Now that was probably one of my favorite things to do on this car. I thought lowering it was awesome, but the interior detail definitely made a huge difference in the driving experience, and I cannot say that enough. I mean, seriously, it completely changed the way that this car felt inside. I mean, not just looks, but just the way things actually physically felt. It felt so much cleaner and so much nicer to be in here. So I went through and put in a ton of work. Honestly, a day's worth of work on this interior. Everything from steam cleaning to extracting the carpets to vacuuming, you name it. I did it. I mean, I went through and kind of went a little bit of above and beyond, if anything, on this interior detail to really bring it back to life. Now, the one thing I couldn't bring back, unfortunately, was this driver's seat, just because that fabric is just so worn there. But I went through on not just the interior and cleaned the carpets, the mats, but I also dialed in the damn trunk to the best of my ability. So really no stone was left unturned on the detail. I tried to knock out every single thing I could. Bring you guys in here for the rear as well. It just really looks and feels so much better. So definitely a huge improvement. Love the way the interior turned out. Now, once the interior was dialed in, that's when this build went into a bit of a stagnant period. And I actually talked about this a little bit on Instagram, but basically for a month to almost month and a half, nothing was really getting done on the car, and that's because I was waiting for some paint work to get done. My friend Jonathan, who's done a lot of my other professional paint work, was planning on respraying some of the parts on the car. However, his booth was down. He was having some issues with his lines and his gun, and things weren't spraying properly, and he was like, dude, I'm waiting on it to get fixed, just hold off for a little bit longer. So during that period, I kind of started tackling other small projects around the car. Now the front bumper that's on the car is not the original front bumper that I got when I first got the car. It is the OEM 99 to 2000 bumper, but this one I actually found in a junkyard already in taffeta white. So I thought that that was a pretty lucky find. It only had just a little bit of a scuff right where the license plate was, but overall was structurally in really good shape. No cracks or anything like that. Now the rear bumper that came with the car wasn't bad. It wasn't horrible, but it did have a crack in the lower portion, and it kind of bothered me as well. So I went to the junkyard again and found another taffeta white rear bumper that had no crack. A couple small scuffs and some spots, but overall in really, really good shape. So all in all, I want to say I paid about 50 to 60 bucks for both a rear and front bumper OEM from the junkyard, already in the taffeta white. Now fortunately the rear bumper was in good enough shape not to have to repaint, but the front bumper, because of that scuff, was part of my respray plan. Now shortly following me finding the front and rear bumper for the car, it was time to place a much needed order off of eBay for the front grille and the lower lip. So the lip I'll get to here in just a little bit because that's kind of interesting, but the grille was something that actually surprised me. Now I do have the OEM 99 to 2000 EM1 grille on the red Civic, and I know the quality of that piece. But this right here, for being an eBay grill and being a one-piece design, was actually pretty damn close in terms of the overall shape and the honeycomb structure in the middle there. So while yes, I did have to tape this off for paint to make it look good, I think that they got this thing pretty spot on, especially for being a $13 grill. Now the OEM one is what, 1, 2, even 3 pieces with the badge in the middle, and this just being one. And if you're good at taping and good at painting, you can make it look just as good as an OEM grill. So I was pretty stoked on that because back in the day, the grills were pretty cheap when I was a teenager. I remember most of them had like a metal mesh in the inside and it just didn't look right, but I feel like that plastic structure in the middle is pretty damn close to OEM. Now, once I had all of my ducks in a row in terms of my pieces I needed for paint, including the grille, the front lip, obviously the OEM side skirts, the side moldings, and even the freaking front bumper that I wasn't planning on, it was finally time for some paint work. So the first thing I had planned was painting these side moldings, so I had to remove those completely from the car and spray those out on their own. Now for this, I wish I would have filmed more of it because it was pretty tedious, but at the same time, I kind of had my hands full. So in order to remove these side moldings here, what you actually have to do is pop off the inner panels. And not just pop off the inner panels, but you have to essentially remove the entire back seat of this car. Now what I mean by this is that if I open up this door here, these side moldings here are clipped in on the inside of this right here. So this entire piece has to be popped out, but you can't get enough clearance inside there with your hand unless you remove the rear seat. So you have to remove both the lower portion of the seat, the upper portion of the seat, and pull back this whole plastic piece to get back inside there. So totally a pain, worth it once you can get it out. But same thing with the front door piece here, pop off the panel that I hate removing because every single time I remove it, I seem to break something, but this time went pretty good. So that side and this side here were resprayed. So this was all done via rattle cans. So same concept I applied to the side skirts as well as the front bumper. Just went through, primed them, sanded them, re-primed them, sanded them some more, and then hit them with my base coat and then 2K clear. And I think that they turned out pretty damn good, and the color match is pretty much spot on. So pretty stoked. So from there was the paint work that I did not plan for, which was the front bumper, the front grille, the front lip, and the side skirts. By far my biggest job I've ever taken on in terms of rattle canning anything at one time. So I have a whole video on that. I highly recommend watching it because I felt like the idea was good. I just didn't show you the final result at that time because I was hoping that this would make up for it. So kind of giving you a walk around here. This was all done via rattle cans. All rattle cans. So it turned out awesome. I think that there was a couple things that I wish I would have gone back and hit over again, but for the most part, the color match is pretty damn good. I think that the bumper turned out awesome. The side skirts turned out great. The front lip, pretty good. The grill I was probably most proud of due to my tape job, but I really wanted to go for the OEM look, and I really wanted to make sure I did a good job masking everything, which is why that front grill portion is still black. That portion is still black right there. That portion is still black, and it kind of ties everything together, making it look so much better. So yeah, good tape job, decent spray job out of a can, and then I went back through and sanded everything and polished it to make it look pretty dang good. So pretty happy, man. Rattle can paint job, baby. Doesn't get better than that. So once the car got some new paint on it in a couple different areas here, it was time for the wheels and tires. So I had gotten the wheels and tires after waiting for several months. I think they were on order for 2 months before I finally got them in. So the wheels are the Koenig Decograms in the 15 by 7.5 size with a 35 offset. Now these are the gloss bronze color that you probably can't see super well because of the shadow here, but I think look absolutely awesome. I'm super pumped on these wheels. I think on the white it just flows so dang good. And so for the tires, I went with the 205 50/15 Nitto Neogens. So basically an all-season tire that have some pretty good grip. This is the exact same setup I'm running on the red Civic and literally have no complaints. I think that this is, again, another one of the best bangs for the buck, along with the suspension, making it ADA spec, but also making it look very good on these cars. Now, on the subject of wheels, some people might want to know how I dialed in the fitment on this car. Now, really, this is a combination of having the right size wheels and tires along with the right ride height to make it look really aggressive. Now, in my opinion, this might be just a tad bit low, especially since this car is not running camber kits. So by not running camber kits, I am rubbing just a little bit. Not so much on the rear here. While yes, it is pretty close, I'm not really rubbing there. I'm more so rubbing on the front fender liners because of how low I am. So depending if the next owner wants to raise it a little bit, obviously they have that option being on adjustable coilovers. Now going back to the front lip here for just a quick minute, I felt like this was worth mentioning because this lip right here was totally a gamble and totally a shot in the dark. I actually was running the lip on the car unpainted for quite some time just to see whether or not I really liked it. I was super unsure about it in the black state it was in, so I knew that once I color matched it, I might like it a little bit more. This lip is from eBay. It's called the RA style front lip. I had never really seen it on many other Civics. I thought it looked kind of interesting, so I thought, why the hell not? Let's try it and see what happens. And so I didn't really like it at first. Honestly, the fitment's not perfect on it. It is an eBay front lip. You can kind of see the gap there, but from a distance, I think it works and I think it looks pretty good. And so once I put it on, I thought, okay, one more finishing touch is that it's going to need the OEM gasket from Honda that they use on the S2000. So that gasket material that you saw me install on my red Civic is the same one I used on this to tie it all together. And I think it makes it look much better, and at least slightly less eBay. Now to complement the eBay lip, I thought that an OE style front mudguard would look really good on the car, along with an OEM rear mudguard on the rear. So I couldn't find one of those at the junkyard, so I ended up just ordering an aftermarket OE style off of eBay, and then installed the OEM one here on the rear that I found at a junkyard. So that's an OE rear mudguard that I thought looked really good. Now I also ended up refinishing the wiper arms here, so I ended up sanding these down and respraying them with just a black wheel paint. I thought it looked pretty good. I was running this car without wipers for quite some time and actually got caught in a couple of rainstorms without wipers, which was not ideal, but I was waiting on repainting them. So repainted those, put on new wiper blades, making that look a heck of a lot better as well. All right, it's getting hot. I'm trying to think of everything I've done and hopefully not missed anything, because it was a lot of little things. Not too many big things, just a lot of little things. And oh yes, the window tint. So I did tint the windows on the car. That was not part of my original plan, but I had some extra money in my budget towards the end of the build here. So I want to say I had like, I think I'd spent 27 something so far, and I had a couple $100 left. So I found a really cheap place to do the window tint for me that actually used quality products. So I got the SunTech carbon tint on the car, not the ceramic, but the carbon version, and 18%. And I think it totally set it off. I was not planning on putting it on there, but I think it made the car look a hell of a lot sportier and really tied everything together. So 18% pretty much all around, all the windows, and then I did 5% on the sunroof just to kind of keep the heat out during the summer months, and I thought that that turned out pretty good. So window tint, not part of the plan, totally glad I did it, but it wasn't part of the plan initially. So yeah, that was kind of where the last of my budget went. All right, so we're coming up on the end here. So after everything was put together, the window tint being done, the wheels, tires being lowered, all of the paintwork being done, the last thing I wanted to do as the cherry on top was one last exterior detail. Now, I understand being a white car, it's not that exciting to detail and polish this, but I knew that I would add some extra gloss and some extra pop to that white paint. Now, the process I used was something I've filmed in a previous video. So a little less than a year ago, I did a full correction on the red Civic, really bringing that paint back to life. I highly recommend checking that out because I did not film the process on this car. Basically, I went through and did a two-step correction on the car with a machine polisher, a couple different pads, compounds, polishes, whatnot, and went through and tried to refine the paint to the best of my ability. Now, with most of this car still being stock paint, I knew that there probably wasn't a whole lot of clear coat left, so I couldn't go too hard in the paint, as some would say. So I did go through though, polish it to the best of my abilities, try to remove a lot of minor imperfections and scratches, and to really bring that gloss out. So I went through, two-step correction, polished it out. From there, as the cherry on top of the cherry on top of the cherry, I actually ended up ceramic coating the car. So I ceramic coated it with G-Technics Exo coating, giving it some protection as well. So not only was it polished, it was also ceramic coated. So the car should hold up for several years to come with really good water behavior as well as UV protection and all that good stuff. Alright guys, so I think I'm going to wrap up the rest of this video in the comfort of my garage. I've been at this spot now for a couple hours. I'm starting to lose my voice and it's getting pretty damn hot outside. So we'll finish up the last bit of this video in my garage.
A few moments later.
Alright guys, so we are back in the comfort of my garage because that previous location started to get a bit of traffic and it was getting pretty hot outside. So I thought I would finish out everything here. So all in all, this build went every bit as good as I hoped it would. Seriously, I think that this car looks, feels, and drives awesome. I'm extremely happy with how it turned out. Now, a couple things I want to cover here because I know people are probably going to ask, Anthony, was this build really possible for that $3,000 price point? And yes, I think that finding this car for $900 was the biggest win. It wasn't easy, but it by far was the biggest win. Being able to find any car that's mechanically sound for 900 bucks is a pretty damn good deal in my eyes. And then everything else, I was able to allocate the rest of my funds on the things that I wanted to, like new wheels and tires and a new suspension setup, and you know, everything else that was kind of an accessory to that to make it in that price point. So I want to say I was pretty much right at that $3,000 mark in terms of a price breakdown of everything. I mean, you guys can probably do the math on your own. A couple of the biggest purchases were obviously wheels and tires, the suspension, the tint, and the paint supplies. Mostly everything else in this car was kind of a DIY using stuff I already had, or just using resources. If you spend your money wisely, this kind of thing is possible. So hopefully I'll be able to sell it for more than what I put into it because of all the time and effort that I put into it as well, because I kind of have to obviously repay myself for that stuff. So anyway, for anybody that's interested in this car, because I know some people might be, you know, very interested and want to know, Anthony, is there any negatives about this car that you want to cover? So one thing that I do want to note is that on the Carfax, it shows that this car was in a front-end collision of some sort back in 2005. Now, it does have a clean title, so it didn't affect that at all, but I did notice that, I think probably from the very beginning, that this car was in probably some sort of accident because the paint was blended into the doors here. Obviously, the bumper is a different bumper and it's got new paint, but I could tell that the hood quality, I guess the hood paint itself was pretty good and seemed like a better quality than OEM. So that was probably refinished along with the fenders going into the doors. Now, when I took off the front bumper, I did notice that the lower bar there on the very, very bottom had a slight indent in it. The crash beam was completely intact, no issues there, but that very low portion had a dent in it. So take what you will from that. The car runs and drives fantastic. It's just that was one of the biggest things I noticed, and that might also affect the hood gap issue there. So somebody might be able to finagle that a little bit more than I can. So one accident shows on the Carfax back in 2005. That was literally 16 years ago, so car's still sound since then. But overall, that was the only other thing I could find. The car is rust-free. It's an Idaho car. It's always been an Idaho car. I think it was in Oregon for a couple of years, but we really don't have rust issues here in the high desert. So, guys, guys, I mean, that's it. If you're interested, if you want to buy this car, reach out to me. We can talk pricing over DMs or anything like that. But yeah, that's it, guys. I mean, car is pretty much done. Now, depending on when this car sells and if it does sell soon, I might be able to film some more content on it. So if you have any ideas, maybe drop them down in the comments below. But I know there's several people interested currently. So if it sells like in the next day or two, that might be the end. This might be the last time you see the car. I don't know. We'll see. So guys, as always, I hope you enjoyed this little build series. I hope it made things maybe more realistic for you in your own journey of your own cheap car, or your own Honda Civic, or whatever it may be for a budget build. And hopefully I was able to help with some ideas along the way. So I'm losing my voice. If you guys like this video and want to see more Honda Civic content, make sure to give me a big thumbs up. Subscribe down below for more. I'll catch you guys in the next one. It's ALLDAYANTHONY. Peace.